Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Dun Bradstreet's discussion today on best-in-class credit-to-cash strategies to strengthen cash flow. First, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. I'm Ryan Camlin. I'll be your moderator today. I lead product management for D&B CoAction, and I'm responsible for driving the strategic direction, development, and the management of the product roadmaps and the go-to-market. During my tenure at Dun Bradstreet, I've had a variety of roles in product development, product marketing, and strategy. And then before joining Dun Bradstreet, I was also a product manager at LexisNexis. Our presenter today is Christopher Rios. He's the head of sales for finance and risk solutions at Dun Bradstreet. Chris brings over 20 years of finance operations experience to Dun Bradstreet. He's held roles across various industries, including manufacturing, services, and security. He's had a focus on organizational development and resourcing, strategic planning, and technology management to build a global shared service model for his business. So very excited to have him here to present to us today. Now, during today's presentation, we're going to invite you to submit questions using the Q&A box, which you'll find on the right of your display panel. Our presentation is scheduled to run for about 50 minutes, and we'll leave time at the end to address your questions. Also, this session is being recorded today, and you'll receive a copy of the session by email tomorrow. And then just before we get started, a few other housekeeping items. All lines are going to be muted throughout the duration of the call. As I mentioned, we invite you to submit questions at any time during the session by using the Q&A box. We'll also email you today's material. So let's just jump here to what we're going to cover. So to start with, we want to cover the current business landscape and the impacts, the credit to cash challenges that landscape creates, and then talk about some new strategies to navigate the emerging risk. And then we'll talk through a solution, the D&B CoAction solution, and how it relates to credit to cash to kind of guide our discussion. And then we'll take Q&A at the end. So before we dive in, what I'd like to do is start with a poll. And I'm just going to bring that poll up on the screen now. And so you should see that showing up on your screen. You'll have the ability to go ahead and vote. What we want to learn from this poll is, have you made changes to your credit to cash policies and processes in the face of novel coronavirus? Go ahead and select from one of the answers here, and we'll just talk through the results. So just give a few moments for folks to kind of put those answers in. Just give it another minute here as you see those responses coming in. Chris, kind of as you're seeing these results come through, kind of any thoughts on what we're seeing in the polling?
Yeah, unfortunately, Ryan, I'm actually not seeing the results pop up yet.
Let me go ahead and share them for you. You should be able to see them.
Yeah. All right. So I see them. Yeah. Look, I think as we progress through these unprecedented times, I'd expect that businesses have pivoted. Some better than others, obviously, but it's good to see that looks like a fair majority have made the adjustment. Just around 38% looks like they've adjusted and they're making updates to their credit to cash processes. Hopefully, for those respondents, will reinforce some of what they're doing throughout the presentation, and then for the others that selected different responses, hopefully we can share some insights, and the takeaway will be to go back and maybe revisit those policies and processes, and perhaps even consider a different use case for how D&B can help support their business.
Makes sense. All right, thanks, Chris. So I'm going to just close that poll out, and then what I want to start with is really just foundational in terms of D&B, and really that's about intelligence. And regardless of the economic situation, it's going to be important. And really what defines intelligence is insight. And D&B has been providing those insights on businesses for more than 178 years through the ups and downs. We've got a database that contains more than 364 million commercial records around the world. It's updated 5 million times a day, and it's both public and private entities. And it's from tens of thousands of different data sources with everything from where a business is located to how they're paying their bills. And these insights create transparency needed for two parties to effectively trade. And those insights become even more important in times of uncertainty, which clearly we're seeing today with the impact of COVID-19 on the economy and on financial markets. And so Chris, for you as a practitioner, and having been in the position of leading credit and collections, what would you be focusing on today, and how would you chart a path forward?
Yeah, I think, and Ryan, if you could, there may be a delay on the slides, but if you want to advance us, I'm still seeing the opening cover slide.
Okay, let me see what's going on there.
So as you advance the slide to answer that question, Ryan, I think, it's interesting. A lot of the customers and colleagues and peers that I speak to, it's interesting that we seem to be going back to what the foundation of good, sound credit decisioning and collection best practices are. Make sure that your policy is updated and reflective of the current state of affairs, both from a macro perspective and then some of the micro impacts that are specific to your business and industry. But I think it's really now, it's not enough to just know how your customer's performing. I think what we find now is there's this interest in understanding the complete value chain. So it's not just knowing your customer, it's knowing who they're providing services or products to, who their suppliers and lenders are. And so, given the current state of affairs, I think it's important that you ingest as much information from a macro lens as well as a micro lens and apply it to how you're treating your customers. And then I'm also seeing and hearing that there's a desire to be a bit sensitive to the current state of affairs, but not lose line of sight into cash flow. And so I think alternatives to how you approach your decisioning and your collection process are really key to reviewing on an ongoing basis. Reviewing your policies once a year or a couple of times a year, I don't think is going to be applicable going forward. I think those policies and processes are going to be living documents, living processes that need to be addressed and updated on a more frequent basis.
Yeah, and Chris, hopefully you're seeing the updated slides here on the share.
Yeah, we're on the transition from conventional to modern. Yep, I got you there.
Great, perfect. Yep. All right, so thanks for that. And really what I want to kind of talk through here is there's really three critical components when you're thinking about mapping a course to sustain cash flow. One is intelligence, and it's using data both to understand who you're doing business with, of course, what's the risk of doing business, and it's both the view you have of that customer, your own data, and then the external view of that data as well, and then taking that intelligence and taking those insights to really use that to drive improved cash flow, drive better efficiency through your processes. Then, of course, using automation, essentially applying technology to improve the speed and consistency of decisioning, the workflows, and essentially using that to drive resource optimization, and doing that in a way that's, of course, integrated. So it needs to be connected both across the different groups, the different silos, and integrated within the various systems as well, so that intelligence is connected in. Chris, what are some strategies that practitioners can deploy to navigate this environment?
Yeah, I think that, as you consider what strategies to successfully navigate emerging risks, it becomes a balance of maintaining cash flow, but also dispensing a level of compassion as you approach your customer base. So really, as I noted at the beginning, it's not moving too far left of what should be foundational. You want to make sure that your onboarding process is comprehensive. I think it's important to start to introduce new analytics, new metrics, things that wouldn't typically or traditionally fall under the credit team's purview, things like supplier data, things like behavior patterns that you've captured in the portfolio, and starting to model and customize those models for the specific needs of your business. one thing that I really encourage businesses to do is the ongoing monitoring of your customer portfolio. Change is happening at a pace that no one individual or team is going to be able to keep up with. So, employing a monitoring and or alert type system or process is certainly going to be beneficial because, inevitably a sale is going to be made. And having grown up in the credit world, I was never in a position or had the luxury of declining a deal. It typically would get escalated and there'd be someone at the executive level who would ultimately make a business decision to make a sale happen. So sales are going to happen even in the face of some adversity or in the face of a financial challenge. What's important is how quickly you can pivot once a situation arises. So rather than react to severe delinquency or financial distress, the monitoring and the alerts allows you to be in a position of proactiveness and really providing insights to your business partners so that they can make those strategic decisions, and you avoid becoming an impediment to the sales process. So that's where I think the value of the credit team, of the collections organization, as we move through the COVID crisis and as other macro events happen, which is inevitable, whether it's wildfires on the West Coast or hurricanes barreling through the Gulf. These are things that are going to impact local communities and businesses. And I think you want to make sure you have a line of sight into how these businesses are, reacting to those events. Insights is pretty straightforward as well. I imagine that many of you on the call today use either your own proprietary analytics. Maybe you have some judgmental scorecards you've created. Hopefully you've employed many of the D&B solutions and analytics, but in order to glean insights from the behavior within the portfolio, it's not enough to just rely on the historical receivables activity. I always use the example of an automobile. Your historical AR data is essentially the oil to that vehicle. We have tools, and you may be employing some of them, that serve as the body of the vehicle or the workflow engine. And the third-party data is really the gas that fuels the insights. And that's really what's going to help you become more of a proactive participant in how you treat your portfolio versus an observant who is reacting to some of those challenges that we're all going through. And then, with the adaptation and personalization, I think COVID is giving us all an example of where we need to adapt. So we've got people working remotely. The folks you would have called typically to follow up on an invoice, they're not in the office in most cases. They're working from home. They've got the distraction of the kids, the dogs, the deliveries that are coming in. You need to adapt in a way that ensures that you're keeping a line of communication with your customer, also ensuring that there's a level of compassion and understanding, but coming up with alternative means for communicating, whether it's automated notifications, emails, creating a digital customer experience where you don't have to rely on individuals on your teams to assume the administrative burden that they would have assumed during normal times. And then personalization is just that. We all have a set of customers that are critical to our businesses. You'd normally treat them differently. And I'd say, you still need to do that. But as you segment your portfolio, you'll start to find that there were customers that were really good pre-COVID, suffering during COVID, and may not be around post-COVID. But then there are other actors, if you will, within the portfolio that may have been financially distressed pre-COVID, are only going to get worse during COVID, and likewise may not be around. And so understanding the makeup of your customers as they existed previously, prior to COVID and where they are today is really going to inform how your portfolio looks in the next 3, 6, 9, 18 months, because the ripple effect is going to be, I think, significant, even if a vaccine, for example, were to come out in the next several months. So again, not too far left of what the foundational recommendations would be in any onboarding of new customers, management of existing customers. It's really more about how do you utilize analytics to glean the proactive insight, so that rather than reacting to a situation, you're getting ahead of it, ensuring that cash flow is sustained, and you're getting ahead of any problematic, customer situations.
Yep. Thanks, Chris. So what I want to do now is just talk a little bit about how our clients use Dun & Bradstreet solutions to deploy those strategies. And, it all does start with that foundation of the credit decision and connecting it back to the strategy piece, really that onboarding component where you're making that decision about whether or not to extend credit, how much credit to extend, what payment terms to extend. And from there, it's using tools like alerts and like monitoring to be able to receive notifications, understand when things are changing, and then also be able to analyze risk across your portfolio to inform your policies, your upfront policies, and then also to do those account reviews. And what we're now able to do with something like CoAction, which we're going to talk about in the next segment, is help you to then activate those insights in areas like collections. So the ability to have automated strategies around collections and actually take action on that information to use data to drive the collection strategies within payments and within cash management as well. And it's using that foundation of data, using those powerful analytics to make decisions in these areas, and then using these tools as well to automate and streamline the finance processes, and then doing that in a way that's integrated. And so it's integrated with your systems, it's synced with your systems, and it's really embedded within your processes. And then it goes back to that previous slide in terms of using these tools to essentially deploy those strategies in each of those areas. Before we move ahead, I want to just do another poll here to really kind of understand where folks are in terms of their evolution in modernizing. So I'm just going to bring up another poll here on the screen. And you should start to see these polling questions coming up. And the question here is, are you using software today to automate your credit to cash process? So this includes things like sending automated reminder emails, assigning and prioritizing tasks. Sort of where are you within that evolution? Have you already kind of taken those steps, and or you're kind of in process of taking those steps? And I could see we're getting some results coming in here, so I'm going to give folks another minute or so to get responses. I think we're about halfway through in the polling. See a few more responses still rolling in. Okay, so let me just go ahead and share these results out. So, Chris, hopefully you can kind of see these results as they've come in here. Be curious to get your perspective on kind of what you're seeing in the results as they've rolled in.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by the one response, which is no plans for implementing automated collections software in 2020. I think there's a bit of trepidation with the current environment, and so that's not necessarily surprising. It is notable though that we do also have a little better than a quarter of the respondents that do have some level of automated collections in place. So I think that's great. I think, as we go through these slides, whether you have a solution in place or not, there's advantages certainly to utilizing the data and analytics to fuel a lot of those automated activities that you may already have in place, or if you don't, it'll give you a sense of where you can take advantage of automation to drive efficiency in your current processes.
Great, thank you, Chris. So let me go ahead and stop sharing these results. And what I want to highlight now is really how the software can help you to activate these strategies. And we'll start with receivables management. And this is really about streamlining your collection processes. Major component is the ability to create automated strategies. And so it's both sending automated emails with account statements, with invoices, and doing that in a more strategic way. And that's where risk-based prioritization comes into play. What we find in many places is prioritization is driven by dollars outstanding, days past due. With this type of a tool, you're able to view both, a customer's payment behavior, their payment risk, also the external view that D&B provides in terms of how is that customer paying everyone else, and essentially, place accounts within risk buckets and then deploy automated strategies against those risk buckets. And you're going to have varying strategies, and Chris will talk about that in some of the upcoming slides in terms of how you would design that kind of a program. And then, of course, there's the workflow management tools that are available. So the team is actually working within a tool. They're collaborating within this tool, both to track their work, put in notes, conduct phone calls, and at a management level, there's visibility across the team into both the AR performance and the individual team performance, what may be driving issues. And then through those insights, you're able to take action and affect certain areas. And there's also the ability and complete hierarchy to assign work out around the team through this tool. So with that, Chris, can you give us a view into how you would put this kind of a tool into practice in your organization?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I like to highlight is the ability to view your information across a unified platform and having access to data and information across that same platform is very important. You want a solution that's going to be intuitive and sort of learn as you're using the system and the tool, but then also provide a collaborative environment, not just collaboration with your respective teams, whether it's credit, collections, cash applications, but also, provide the ability for your customer to be equally engaging and collaborative as you work through certain situations. But specifically now, when we talk about that unified view, what Ryan has up on the screen here is not anything that I would say is a differentiation from what may be in the marketplace today, but this quick snapshot summarizing your portfolio, some of the high-level metrics like revenue and total AR, certainly DSO. The one area that I like to focus on is really cash flow, and cash flow is at the forefront of most executives' minds, even when there isn't a macro event such as COVID going on in the world. One of the things that's interesting about the way we approach cash flow is we look at DSO, and many organizations calculate DSO regardless of what your methodology for calculating it is. Everyone knows their DSO number in many cases, but there's always a target DSO. And the delta between the real and the target DSO is where I think tools such as CoAction come into play. What's contributing to that delta? What's preventing your customers from helping you achieve and realize that optimal DSO? And what we find when we dig into it, and I think we'll touch on this in over the next several minutes and several slides, is there are contributing factors that go well beyond just financial distress. Things like disputes that are related to billing issues, pricing issues, POD related issues, the inability to accurately and timely apply cash. So, the balance sheet looks great, there's cash in the bank, but you haven't been able to match those remittance details up to an actual invoice. So you're reconciling over 1 day, 2 days. In my experience, some dollars can sit unapplied for several days. All of these things are contributing to your inability to maximize that cash flow. And nothing I just stated is related to any level of distress. Unfortunately, I think collection still remains a bit of a dumping ground for issues that arise operationally in the periphery of the process. But the ability for that team, collections folks, credit analysts, and the like, the ability of them to consolidate information and report it out to those other operational owners, that's the value add that we promote. That's where it's not just a dumping ground for issues and a thankless position to be in, where you're trying to figure out how to resolve these issues. Your ability to consolidate information, putting it out there to the operational owners in a meaningful way, allowing them to resolve the issues and track their activities, is what this unified platform enables. And that's why many businesses are successful when they employ, solutions like this one, because of that intuitive, collaborative experience that they can achieve. And as we dig deeper, everything, we from a management perspective, whether it's the executive, director, manager, supervisor, yes, the consolidated views are great, but I think the benefit of a solution that introduces automation to take the burden, that administrative burden, away from team members is important, because when you really step back from the credit, collections, cash application, that order to cash or invoice to cash process, what you start to see are very labor intensive manual tasks. These aren't value add in the sense that they're activities that the user is required to perform. And while it's important, it's really a byproduct of not having the right tools in place. And one of the things that we suggest is let the system dictate and drive the workflow of the user, not the other way around. We can develop and configure views and activities and tasks that are really created systematically based on the behaviors within the portfolio. So one thing I always ask customers is, do you segment your portfolio? Inevitably, they all say yes. And whether it's as simple as, hey, most dollars, most days outstanding, high, medium, low risk, or the more sophisticated scenarios may employ heavy data and analytics to segment the portfolio. The challenge is really when you ask, what are you doing once the portfolio is segmented? And that's where I get a mixed bag of responses, because it's okay to segment your portfolio, but how are you treating the high risk account versus the low risk account, the high dollar account versus the low dollar account? And you find that sometimes you're employing resources and expending those resources in the same way, regardless of that segmentation. And that's where automation can really create efficiency. And this is just a nice graphical representation of a user's view of what their segment of a portfolio could look like. And as you can imagine, each of these areas you would in reality drill into each of these. But this is a way that a user steps into their workflow and they see what they need to address in order of priority, rather than subjectively try to determine what they should do, who they should call. Should it be a call versus an email? Should I escalate this or shouldn't I? And rather than them have to figure out, which again I call the administrative task, let the system, based on all of the parameters that you've established, make those determinations. And now you've got a user that can quickly action what those activities are, rather than trying to figure out. So that time lost in setting up your own priorities subjectively, that all goes away. And now you've got an employee who is much more efficient. They're addressing issues, reconciling items quickly, and hopefully providing the analysis that is meaningful to their supervisors, managers, and the business overall. And of course, as I noted, you really, one of the key things to drive automation and really get away from the judgmental aspect of automation or scorecards is when you couple risk with strategy. So here in this view, this is an account view, and we've got some standard things that you'd expect to see. But going beyond just the dollars outstanding and the total past due and percentages delinquent, take note of the strategy section. This particular account is classified as moderate risk. The overall risk to the far right is also medium. These are based on the performance of the customer. This is based on some of those risk data points that you can see in the center of the screen: days past due, the account level DSO, average days to pay. All of this information informs what type of strategy, and within the strategy, what steps you as the user should be taking, but more importantly, what are the series of steps the system is going to take? All of those administrative steps, let them assume that burden. Now the result is a more efficient user because they're taking the action rather than trudging through all of these data points. You build a strategy and you set up a series of steps that both the system itself, so in this case, the software, and the user goes through, but they're doing it in a more efficient, prioritized way. And now that user is able to take the proactive steps to resolve whatever the issue is. If it's a distress situation, if it's resolving a dispute, or if it's simply just partnering with the cash team to ensure that money is getting applied timely and accurately. That's where their value add is, not in pulling all of this data together and trying to come to some conclusion as to what the next step should be. One of the things that used to frustrate me, and as a credit analyst, and then later in my career as a manager and supervisor, was the inconsistency, and I take part blame for that in my roles as a leader. But it was difficult in the absence of a solution that was unified, intuitive, and collaborative. I was sort of leaving my team to subjectively determine what their activities for the day would be. Here's just a screenshot of one simple example where something you assume to be very easy, so creating an email. When you think about the steps that you need to take in the absence of automation, there are minutes that lead to hours, that lead to days of valuable time lost because users are queuing up emails, the keystrokes associated with creating that email, the potential for inaccuracy, whether you fat finger a number, whether the tone of your email is ill-received by the recipient. Now you've got a customer-facing issue potentially. Here's an example where through a series of pre-configured templates, maximizing your contact lists, rather than have that user have to queue up their own email, type out all of the information. Here's a way to quickly automate. Based on some of the strategies and the risk that's assigned to an account, the system could proactively, in advance of an invoice due date, queue up an email with a pre-configured template, feed the data into that template, and send out that communication, essentially leaving the human aspect of it out of the equation. Based on that performance, based on your definition of risk, based on the series of steps within the strategies you've established, the system is now capable of taking all of that information, determining, is this a reminder notice? Is this a first dunning letter? Is this a final notice? And the system is now becoming more intuitive and sending out those communications. At the same time, and in parallel, setting up reminder tasks for the user. So rather than them having to navigate through an Outlook calendar, or, I'm sitting here with 50 stickies and sticky notes in front of me, the system now is setting those tasks up so that in a week from now, when those invoices should have been paid, the system is notifying the user that you've got promises to pay that haven't come in, or you need to contact this customer. So it's a series of steps lead to a tremendous amount of efficiency in the overall process. And this is, automated emails and pre-configured templates is just a small example of how we arrive at that higher level of efficiency. And here, we talked about segmentation. You look at the priority here in the middle of the screen. If you want to go back a slide, Ryan, this is, we've got critical, high, medium, low risk, and that's great. And we all have our own definitions of how we identify critical versus low risk. It's really, the question becomes, however, what are you doing? once you've segmented? What's the treatment? What's the strategy? What are the steps? Ideally, you're going to treat a low risk, low dollar account different than you treat a high risk, high dollar account. And by that, I mean, typically the low dollar, low risk account is low risk for a reason. They pay their bills on time. If not on time, not too far outside of their terms. Why, the question becomes, why would I expend a resource calling that account? I'd rather focus my resources on the higher risk accounts, let the system through a series of automated steps communicate with that low risk, low dollar customer. What you'll find over time is that you're able to maximize your resources. So for those businesses that are already stressed or tapped out as far as resources, they have limited capacity, this is a way to maximize them. Maybe you're wondering, do I have any redundancies in my process? So as you automate, you realize I have access to more resources. Maybe they can be reallocated to more value-added activities. So the idea of automation isn't just to get through things quicker or more efficiently. It's really allows you as a supervisor, manager, even as a user, to step back and say, okay, I've got this time now available to me. How am I going to use it? And what's the value add I bring to my role and ultimately to your organization? And all of the byproduct of that is going to be sustainable cash flow, increased cash flow, optimizing working capital, all of the things that, the senior leadership is really looking for those, for lack of a better term, back office functions to provide. And now it's right there, and you can start to produce reports and track these efficiencies in a way that shows where you're adding value to the overall business and the overall selling cycle in reality. And rather than be perceived as simply a cost center, you now are contributing to the top line as much as you're helping avoid costs on the bottom line. So a lot of value can be gained through automation of even to the slightest degree. You'll realize a lot of benefit. So, here you've heard me bring up strategy, and it sounds great. And yes, I understand, but in practice, in application, what we have in our solution is the ability through the user interface. And I draw a very clear distinction between configurability and customization. If we all had, deep pockets and we could afford to hire IT resources, we probably would, and people to do coding and really customize the solutions to meet the very specific needs we have. Many of us don't have that luxury. Businesses don't want to expend resources on IT and on offshore resources. So one of the benefits here is our ability to put into the user's hands through the user interface the ability to configure, not customize, but configure strategies. In this particular example, we have a moderate risk account. So that's a segmentation. We've segmented our portfolio. Now we want to assign a treatment, a series of steps to those moderate risk accounts. And here in the example, we have everything from, D&B analytics. So the CCS is the commercial credit score, the PAYDEX, the financial stress score. We're incorporating some of the amount due on the account. And what that's helping us determine is now the little bubble to the right here is what are the steps? So I've got a moderate risk account. They have an amount greater than $0. I've put some parameters. I've used some of the standard D&B scores to establish parameters. What do I want the system to do? Well, first thing is I want to send a reminder. It's a moderate risk account, which means they likely pay a little slow, but not something I need to get too worried about. So let's send a payment reminder. But rather than a person do that, have the system do that, reminding the customer when payment is due. When the payment isn't due, or rather when the payment that was due isn't met, we send the first notice. Again, let's let the system do that. Maybe it's 5 days delinquent, system sends it. Second notice, so many days after that. After the second notice, though, now we've got to escalate. Where are we escalating to? any number of recipients. You can escalate to your manager. You can escalate to your legal department. You can escalate to the sales rep. You can even escalate to your third-party collection agency. And then ultimately, when all said and done and payment still hasn't come in, you want to place the account on hold. These are everything that I've described is being done systematically. You're alleviating that admin burden off of the shoulders of your team, putting it on the system. You define it. And the beauty of this is it's defined within this user interface. You're not stopping to put a ticket in with your IT department. You're not wondering if you're going to have resources to take the system down, open up the code, and write in all of these changes. It's done and can be done on the fly. And the one example I'll use, and I spoke to a customer right before we had a better sense of the COVID impact. We knew it was happening. A customer said, boy, just out of the gate, it would have been great to be able to reduce all my credit lines by 10%. I just wanted to reduce my exposure. But now, because they didn't have a system that they could just quickly go in and do that and make that policy adjustment, they were tasking their credit analyst with going through each account and literally reducing those lines by 10%. Not an efficient use of time. Had this been employed, they could have come into this UI, they could have quickly made that adjustment and applied it across the entire portfolio. Again, a very simplified example, but hopefully it illustrates the power of having the capability through a user interface versus having to rely on IT to build out those custom type of features or functionality.
Yeah, thanks. So, we talked about receivables management, we talked about collections, but ultimately that results in a payment that's going to come in. And, many times that payment ends up being a check. And, that in and of itself creates additional time. And it's, in many ways, not the greatest experience for your customers. And so what a payment portal allows you to do is really create a self-service experience for your end customers, gives them a place where they can log in online, they can see all the invoices they have open. What's unique about D&B in this area is, many times you may post those invoices potentially at an account level, where you could potentially be presenting all the open invoices for a DUNS number, because that AP person may cover the entire entity, which D&B would have visibility into, or even an entire family tree. And so those are some of the ways, even within D&B, that would make our portal unique in a way, kind of taking advantage of the DUNS number and of the linkage information. And then once in that portal, they have the ability to make payments with either a credit card, ACH, or bank transfer. And so ultimately what you're doing is really creating a digital front door, digital experience when it comes to taking and receiving payments. And then the other nice part about that is it immediately reconciles that payment to that invoice as well, and avoids other manual processes that would result if you had received that payment via check. So Chris, what are some of the considerations that you would have if you were putting a payment portal into place?
Yeah, I think, making it's all about the user experience, right? We all, I would imagine we've all shopped on Amazon or Walmart or Target or any number of the retail e-commerce sites. It's typically a nice experience. It's self-serve. I'm not bothered by anyone. I can retrieve my history as far as orders or payments. And so it's about creating a positive customer experience. And as an extension of what we just went over from the receivables management discussion we were having, really think of it this way. If you can envision a scenario where I've got a low or a moderate risk account, maybe they owe me less than $5,000. I want the system to initiate a notification. Again, take that burden off of the analysts themselves. But that email now can contain a secure link. So that's a friendly reminder email. It's one of those pre-configured notices. There's a link embedded, a highly secure link. That customer will be able, through their own user ID and password, to access their portal, and they'll have visibility into all of the open invoices any of the statement of accounts that may be available. They have the ability to even dispute an item if they find something is incorrect or a product or service wasn't delivered to their satisfaction, and the facilitation of payment. So we refer to this as a payment portal, but it's really an experience that we're trying to create for the customer. And it's the customer experience, and it's the ability to introduce this digital experience. And by that, I mean, the time it takes you to manually generate an invoice, get it folded, stuffed, and sent out via regular mail, there's a tremendous amount of cost associated with that. Not just the cost of the envelope, the paper, the stamp or postage. It's the cost of the equipment that you're using to generate those documents. It's the cost of the overhead, the resources that have to manage those machines and manually do that stuffing of envelopes and sending out documents. On the customer side, on your customer's end, those that are still generating a physical check. Now, look, the days of, yes, you do that because of float. There's a number of ways to take advantage of float. What we're introducing is also an equal opportunity to deliver savings for the customer, because the digital experience allows them to retrieve documents automatically through the portal. It facilitates payment, whether it be credit card, ACH, wire, direct debit. And you know, there's still a lot of businesses that love paying with credit card. They may get incentives or bonuses or cash back, particularly the small and medium-sized businesses. That's still something they love to take advantage of. But now you're also helping them reduce their costs, because the same cost to generate an invoice is no different than those same costs to generate a physical check. So now you're actually enabling not just a greater customer experience and a self-service experience, but you're creating an opportunity for both parties to save time and money. And I think that strengthens relationships over time. And the more that you're creating a situation where you can enable your customer to also generate savings, I think that says a lot about, you know, how you care about the customer. And it's all about that experience. And it's even more so important, particularly now when businesses are challenged and struggling and cash flow isn't what it could or should be. And so this collaborative scenario is really what I encourage customers to consider when they're looking at portals. And whether you have your own portal or not, there's functionality that can be the front-facing component of your portal, with what Ryan has on the screen here, or we could serve as the engine on the backside of your existing portal, just to enhance that experience.
So we've talked a lot about the outward approach of communicating with customers, putting strategies in place and making it easier to pay. But ultimately there will be payments that come in the form of check, and having an effective process in place for cash management is key. And it's really the sort of application and reconciliation of those payments to reduce the time to money. And you know, with these types of tools, you could put intelligent matching into place and really leverage a rules-based approach or machine learning approach to match those payments in an automated way to an invoice, and do it in a way that's integrated both with your lockbox and with your bank. So Chris, from your perspective, what are the critical factors in improving cash flow and moving payments to cash quicker?
Yeah, it starts with what I mentioned. It's the ability through your existing or through a solution like CoAction to enable that digital experience, the ability to EIPP, right? The electronic invoice presentment and facilitating payment, and transitioning customers from that physical check to more of the ACH payment. Again, helping them reduce their costs, helping expedite and accelerate cash to you as the business selling a product or service. One of the things, and look, if you're using a lockbox, or even if you're not, if you have certain tools that you may be employing to facilitate the matching of remittance payments to invoices, the one differentiator that I want to highlight, and just in the interest of time, I want to focus on, is what we refer to as probability matching. So The banks will employ resources that'll do the keying of information. That comes at a cost per keystroke. Sometimes there are systems out there that may do matching, but they rely on a 100% match, and anything that's less than that gets kicked out as an exception, really relegating the Cash App analyst to have to trudge through a series of open invoices or a series of accounts that are trying to reconcile those payments to open invoices. Probability matching actually takes into consideration all attributes on the customer record, all the attributes on the payment itself, all of the attributes on the remittance detail that's provided, even if that remittance detail is decoupled from the actual payment. And what the system is able to do is determine the likelihood of where a payment goes. So rather than just kick out an exception, leaving the analyst to their own, reconciliation process, the system will start to suggest the likelihood of a match. Here we have a perfect example of 100% probability, but as an example, there could easily have been a 90%. And rather than have your analyst trudge through all of the open items because there was a payment that kicked out as an exception, you start to focus their attention on the greatest likelihood of where a payment goes. So now, obviously, if I have a payment for $500 and two invoices, one has a probability of 90%, the other a probability of a 20% match. That's the system telling you where to start, making that user more efficient, because in the absence of that directional probability, what if that user started with the 20%? They wouldn't have known because they don't have that indication. And now you run the risk of money getting applied to an invoice, because it's easy to assume that because it's a $500 payment and I have a $500 invoice, that must be where the money goes. Well, in reality, there's a lot of other key attributes. It could be the business name, it could be the address, it could be the bank account itself, routing numbers, account numbers. It could even be a specific reference item that that customer uses that you've missed. The system will start to take into account the behavior of those payment patterns. And so subsequent payments that come in, even if there's a missing item, it will look to all of the other attributes to determine a match. To me, that's very powerful because that further reduces time to money. You're getting the money in, but how quickly am I getting it applied? And you're optimizing your people resources because now they can focus in on those higher probability items. And I think that just furthers the whole efficiency statement that we're making here. So, Ryan, we could probably move through these fairly quickly. These are screen images of what our cash management portal looks like, not too dissimilar to some of the slides we showed in the receivables management portal. The one thing that I'll highlight is what you see here, your collectors can see. We establish segregation of duties based on access rights, roles, and responsibilities. But again, back to collaboration. When that cash application person is in this system creating notes on an account, those notes, those activities are all captured in the receivables management module. So now as you need to reconcile payments, there's a much more collaborative space for those individuals to work in rather than rely on emails and picking up the phone and running the risk of someone being out, not available. You start to build all of this within the tool. And those same steps I talked about previously become the same steps that you can build out for cash management so that notifications and alerts are triggered based on certain activities. Hopefully that was beneficial to everyone and you found it advantageous to participate, because I think there's a real opportunity here to optimize your resources, both people and technology. And in just wrapping up to leave us a few minutes for Q&A, we're just trying to reinforce. Look back at your onboarding process. Try to incorporate as much macro data as you would the micro data points. I think it's only going to make you better at the upfront decisioning. Inevitably, sales are going to happen even in the face of higher risk. Businesses make the decision to do business with high risk accounts. monitoring and alerts becomes crucial, because you need to manage your portfolio as well as the specific accounts. Incorporating third-party analytics, whether you have some proprietary scores or you couple D&B scores with those models, I think that you'll glean more insights around the behavior of your portfolio in combining that information. And, adaptation and personalization is really specific to your business, specific to your industry and your customer base. I think the ability to pivot and be flexible and introduce different ways to maintain a line of communication that doesn't rely heavily upon phone calls is critical. So I encourage everyone to look back and really focus in on what are those manual task-oriented activities that you and your teams are performing. That's probably going to be the best place to start when you think about what should I automate, what can I automate, and hopefully what we shared gives you the how you can go about doing that.
Great. Thank you, Chris, for sharing your perspective. What we want to move to now is spend some time just answering questions. I could see a few questions have come in on the Q&A, so we'll start to tee some of those up. One of the questions, and I'll kind of ask this in a more broad way, Chris, is how does the system talk to either your accounting system or the ERP system for a business, and even think from a perspective of large to small businesses?
Yeah, the benefit of a solution like this, given its agnostic nature, it's really done through a series of file transfer type protocols. Now, that's an oversimplification. We certainly have done integrations across APIs and other web services and other type of connectors. What we found, given the nature of the receivables workflow, a nightly file transfer protocol to get that open AR data into this middleware, or what I refer to as middleware. Very simple process. We perform a lot of the mapping and translation of those interfaces. We've done integrations with everything from your enterprise ERPs, SAP, Oracle, Workday, as well as legacy systems. And it's not a laborious process. And what we like to promote is the low dependency that our customers have on their IT resources, given the nature of the interface process, as well as what I mentioned earlier, which is a lot of work can be done through the user interface as opposed to heavy development work that you may find in some other solutions out there in the marketplace. I just wanted to, because I'm reading these questions. So look, the actual implementation is not exhaustive in that we typically find that one module, so we didn't mention this, but this CoAction is a modular solution. So, we work with our customers. What's their appetite? Do you want to start with one module or all of them? We can work either way. On a module by module basis, you're probably somewhere in the 6 to 8 week implementation timeline. That's all in. So as long as we can work to get the OpenAR file and get a bank lockbox file so that we can map those through our interface, we're talking roughly a 6 to 8 week exercise. If you go with an end-to-end solution, which would be receivables, cash, and the payment portal, we're probably more around that 12-week time frame. It's that's pretty quick, considering what I've investigated as more like 4 or 5 to several months, if not even approaching a year or more for certain solutions out there. I mean, your enterprise ERPs are typically 18 plus months of implementation, but we operate nicely because of the agnostic nature of the solution in those spaces. And from this is not cost prohibitive because of the low IT dependency, because of our ability to get the solution stood up and running fairly quickly in that 6 to 8 week or 8 to 12 week time frame. The professional service hours are low. There's some standard professional service hours, but they also afford you the opportunity to work with our implementation team to help you build out those strategies. And pricing is based on invoice volume. So depending on the size of business and the volume of transactions you're processing annually, that's really going to determine what band you fall into. But as with anything, we need a full understanding of your business, the makeup of the business, the transactional volume, and then we sit down through a whole exercise to really make sure that you understand, one, the value that we're providing. So we have a value calculator, there's ROI metrics that we sit down and share with you. And then from there, we really help you build that business case so that you can go back to your decision makers and be confident that we're going to deliver on all of those metrics that we talk about at the beginning of any engagement.
Okay. Well, look, Chris, thank you. I know we're at the top of the hour here, so just want to be respectful of folks' time. Appreciate the questions. Thank you all for joining us today. We've recorded the session, so please look for an email in your inbox over the next few days. This email is going to include a recording of the session, a copy of the presentation slides, and a way to contact us for more information and to take advantage of the complimentary demo offer as well, where we can dive deeper into these solutions.
Yeah, and Ryan, just real quick, everyone,
Yep.
for the questions that weren't answered, I will make sure that we respond to those, Ryan, and I will get answers to those few questions here at the end that we weren't able to get to. So rest assured, you'll get a response from us on those questions.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.